Chapter 43. The death of the Nafs is obligatory for the seeker. Know, may God count you among the people of His sacred presence, that the death of your Nafs, your lower self, is an obligation. It is through this that the spiritual masters, the shuyukh, have obtained spiritual opening, and it is with this that they are best able to direct you towards the spiritual practices which will lead you to the death of your Nafs. You can only practice these exercises after receiving idhn, authorization from your Shaykh. If you think of wanting to educate your own soul in some way or another, know that at that moment you have left the circle of divine mercy. For example, if you decide to practice begging without the idhn of your Shaykh, you are committing a serious error. The shuyukh have authorized begging to lead souls towards sincerity, and your Shaykh is the only one who truly knows your nafs. He is therefore the only one who knows at what point in your spiritual journey this exercise will be beneficial to you. The idhn is of paramount importance. The people of God would go even so far as to ask for their sheikh's permission in order to have intimate relations with their wives, so that if a child were born from this union, they would hope for the barakah of both the sheikh and the idhn. This idhn, this permission, is in fact a divine permission, and it holds a hidden reality. It is like an act of worship whose haqiqah, whose reality, is nothing other than strong intention, niyyah. The idhn is very elevated. The Shaykh uses it only to distance the disciple from the love of the here below and immerse him in the presence of God. Its reality remains hidden from the disciple until he reaches the second reading of the divine name, the Lam of constriction, and is amazed by what he understands. He realizes with absolute certainty that the Shaykh's permission is the disclosure of the secret of kun fayakun, be and it is, and that it originates in the spiritual realm, the malakut. He also understands that the reality of the universal man, Insan Kamil, remains hidden. This reality is Sayyiduna Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. He is the greatest veil, al-hijab al-akbar, separating man from his creator, since although he is perceived as a simple human being, he no longer has anything human. He is the exemplar of the divine light, totally extinguished in the lordly presence. Shaykh al-Alawi says about this, if the secret of sainthood, of wilaya, were revealed, the reality of prophethood, nubuwah, would have been distinguished. The disciple who wishes to advance towards his Lord must seek this veil before anything else, because when he comes near him, in reality, he has come near God. Of course, far be it from us to think that he would be Allah, but we say this in the sense that he is the divine presence for whoever is near him. If you reject this, what do you make of the hadith in which the chosen one tells us that God will say to his servant, O son of Adam, I was sick and you did not visit me? The man will reply, Lord, how can I visit you when you are the master of the worlds? God will say, did you not know that my servant so-and-so, Abdi Fulan, was sick? Yet you did not visit him. Had you done so, you would have found me with him. The Arabic term used here is Abdi Fulan, the servant so-and-so. This means that God is not talking about just any servant. No, he is talking about a very special servant, the one whom God sends every 100 years to the Muslim Ummah to revive his religion. The holy divine presence is with this beloved of God, about whom the Hadith Qudsi says, whoever shows hostility to one of my beloved, awliyaullah, even if it were for my sake, I would declare war on him. Realize this slave's position with the truth. You need only show him hostility to receive the war of the Lord of the universes. But what is the war of God? It is a bad end. You will see a Muslim spend his entire life in prayer and worship and end it in turmoil and divine estrangement, simply for having taken the wali as an enemy. Therefore, what is your interest in putting yourself in such a situation? Why not simply hold your tongue and avoid causing your own downfall? The hadith continues, and Allah says, and my servant keeps drawing nearer to me with voluntary acts until I love him, indicating that proximity and divine love are realized through voluntary acts, nawafil. And what are the signs of God's love? I become the hearing with which he hears, our Creator tells us. At this stage, the disciple is immersed in the divine presence, so that everything he can hear comes from the real. He then says, I become the sight with which he sees. In other words, the disciple sees his sight disappear into the light of God, so that he has limitless sight, allowing him to perceive the light in all things. God goes on to say, I become the hand with which he grasps. His hand is the hand of engagement with the real. It is illuminated by the divine light, like Sayyidina Musa والسلام, to whom God said, and press your hand under your armpit. It will come out white without any harm, and that will be another wonder. I become the foot with which he walks. Wherever he is, the wali is flooded with barakah, with divine blessing. He is blessed, and every place where he places his foot is blessed. He is the lamp, the misbah, manifested in the physical world. This is the path that leads to wilaya, to sainthood, and all of this is without any mixing with the Creator or Incarnation, hulul wa ittihad. We must distinguish the Lord of the universes, the one and singular Allah, from the divine disclosures, the tajalliyat. So that you can understand the difference, here are some ahadith that many would like to reject, and which make the hearts of those who are far from esoteric realities tremble. We are told that the Prophet ﷺ said, I saw my Lord in the image of a beardless young man wearing green shoes. There is also the hadith in which he tells us that Allah placed his fingers between the two shoulder blades of the Prophet until he felt coolness in his chest. He thus learned the knowledge of the first and the last. In these two examples, it is obviously not the personification of God. No, it is a divine manifestation, a tajalli. It is like the angel Gabriel, who manifested himself in the form of the companion Dihya to teach the companions their religion. There is absolutely no mixture between the Creator and his creation. Therefore, and as if you have seen in the explanation of the hadith of the wali, this beloved of God is not just anyone. He is sent by his Lord to revive the Muslim religion in each century. It is therefore natural that the wali appears with his own sharia, his own divine law. Of course, he does not change anything in the religion of God and the sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ. He delves into the sunnah, into the prophetic tradition, to draw from it foundations that will be difficult for the seeker to bear, and with which he will have to be patient throughout his journey. It is therefore imperative for you to conform to this sharia, and this until your passions are extinguished and disappear in the Muhammadan passion. And if you think that the law revealed by the wali comes from his own nafs, then it would be better for you to spend all your wealth, hoping that God may accept your repentance. The problem facing the disciple is his confined intellect. He thinks he can understand and realize the knowledge of his Lord, but he refuses to separate himself from this intellect which imprisons him. This is why the Shaykh instills within him this divine light that will expand his intellect so that he can grasp what was previously elusive to him. At the same time, the disciple must combine the sharia of the wali with that of the Messenger of God ﷺ, if he wants to see the stars and the galaxies folded into his heart. As for the light that descends into your heart, know that it knows perfectly well its origin, which is the blessed tree. It sees nothing else in this universe but this tree. Moreover, when you move away and observe the galaxies, you will see them as leaves, and you will realize that this universe is in fact nothing other than an olive tree. You may be wondering how, despite all of this, some people still manage to deny the Shaykh, or worse, to fight him. In reality, it is not they who deny this divine breath, but it is the divine breath that denied them and refused to broaden their intellect and understanding. It separated itself from them, and the light returned to its origin, which is none other than the Shaykh. The Sharia of Tarbiyah, spiritual education, is difficult for the path. It contains true knowledge, which is divine knowledge, and only true men can bear it. You have read a few books on tasawwuf and you think you can grasp this subtle science. In reality, if you were to compile all the books you have read concerning spiritual education, you would not have read anything more than the introduction of the introduction of the introduction of the science of tasawwuf, of Sufism. This science cannot be read. It cannot be learned by heart from books. It is transmitted only through the Sharia and Tarbiyah. This is why you must be very careful of yourself and your intentions. Beware of asking for the divine presence while your heart is drowned in this world. How can it flood a heart that is fully turned towards the here below? The Prophet ﷺ himself warned us by saying, the dunya is cursed, as is everything in it, except the dhikr of God and everything related to it, as well as the scholar and the student. He, alayhi salatu wasalam, also said, hellfire hides behind desires and passions, while paradise hides behind efforts and difficulties. In other words, everything that leads you to the passions of this world will drag you to the fire of hell, while supererogatory acts, nawafil, that are difficult for the nafs, will elevate you to paradise. Do not imagine that simply possessing nothing of this lower world is a sign that you have detached yourself from it. This is a subtle trap of your nafs. Some have lost everything and have nothing left, but remain totally attached to the dunya. They are lazy people who do not want to work out of laziness, and who proclaim themselves ascetics. In reality, if they could benefit from the bounty of this lower world without effort, they would not deprive themselves of it. The true disciple compels his limbs to abandon the here below by applying the fundamentals of the way of God, such as siyaha. By this practice, his heart and his limbs will become accustomed to abandoning this lower world. It is for this reason in particular that siyaha is obligatory in our tariqah. It must be practiced at least once a year for a minimum duration of 10 days. God says in the Quran, Allah granted you victory at Badr while you were humiliated, so fear God that you may be thankful. You must understand that the constant quest for the sight of the full moon, Badr, must be your top priority. Abandon the quest for this ephemeral and illusory world and accept the apparent humiliation that is often synonymous with inner illumination. This is how God will grant you victory over your most dangerous enemy, your nafs. My dear beloved, if you truly wish to annihilate yourself in the presence of your Lord, if you sincerely and more than anything wish to realize His nearness and His knowledge, then put into practice this education that we described to you, step by step. Remain in the companionship of those who have lived and realized the spiritual path, the salikin, those who have seen and known, the arifin, those who have been enraptured in the Lord's presence, the majdubin, and those who have gathered all divine disclosures into one, muhiddin. Seek to know their spiritual reality if you want to know your own reality. If only you realize their place with God, if you could only approach their reality, you would realize their importance, and you would never separate yourself from them again. If you fail to understand this haqiqah, this reality that flows within them, it is because your darkness and your distance have veiled you from their esoteric realities. This is why, failing to understand what the intellect cannot grasp, at least benefit from their presence. This is what the Karkari does. He is in the physical and spiritual companionship of his Shaykh. Through his commitment to him, the bayah, he receives the light in his heart, and he becomes a true wayfarer. He then practices dhikr until he no longer sees the darkness. It is there that he enters the khulwa to extinguish himself in the letter Ha of the divine name. At this level, some are subject to waswas, satanic whisperings. They forget all the efforts they have made in their journey, all the dhikr, all the nights of worship, and say to themselves that this is black magic, seher. But how can a seher do dhikr? How can the sorcerer, who is supposed to be in darkness, immerse you in the light and lead you to increase your worship so much? Others, on the contrary, will take advantage of the khulwa to move away from the here below, the dunya, and pursue their spiritual elevation. They pursue a path through God and no longer to the nafs. They achieve true freedom, that of freeing themselves from the chains of this lower world and elevating themselves to the point of completing the first 3 readings of the name Allah. The Prophet ﷺ said, "There is a way to polish and remove the rust from the heart. It is the dhikr of God. This rust that forms and obstructs your heart is your darkness. The means you have to cleanse your heart of this darkness is none other than the Shaykh. He calls you to the dhikr of God, to the vision of His light, and to the purification of the heart. He calls you to participate in gatherings of dhikr, about which the Messenger of God ﷺ said, there is no group of people who sit to remember God except that the angels surround them. Mercy covers them, and serenity descends upon them, and Allah mentions them to those who are with Him. If the one who has been honored with khulwa, the spiritual retreat, finds himself in such a gathering while thinking that it might be black magic or seher, it means that his heart and intellect have completely returned to the darkness that characterized them. They are dead and devoid of all light. because a truly luminous intellect could not doubt for a single second this immense grace of his Lord. This happens often. A few years ago, a group of disciples decided to leave the tariqah. Among them was a university professor with a doctorate who began to doubt the truth of the light. Yet he had received all the necessary proof, since he himself had testified to witnessing the Prophet ﷺ in the waking state with his eyes open and closed. Now, the Prophet ﷺ tells us, "Whoever sees me in a dream will have truly seen me, because the devil cannot take my form." The Prophet ﷺ is only speaking here of the degree of the pious dream. What then can we say about the one who performed his ablutions, sat facing the Qibla, made dhikr, and saw the Prophet in a waking state? What use could all the diplomas of this professor have been? What use was his doctorate to him if, despite these gifts from God, he came to doubt his light and leave his path? Glory and praise be to God, who preserved us from an intellect subject to waswas, and who enabled us to give great reverence to visions while we were still disciples of our Shaykh. We then became aware of their extreme importance, since they are a revelation closest to God. The universe is, and has always been, absolute nothingness, and it is this nothingness that you must realize. You must succeed in making the universe disappear in the divine light in order to understand its non-existence. This will only be possible for you through the divine secrets. It is through them that you will then be able to return to this extinguished universe while remaining in the lordly presence. Some do not succeed. They have been enraptured in the divine presence and no longer distinguish between anything after having achieved fana, annihilation. They are called the enraptured ones, the majdub. They are of no use to themselves or to others. They are stuck at the station of annihilation without being able to elevate themselves any further. Now, after the station of fana, of annihilation, the disciple must achieve the station of baqa, subsistence by Allah. This is a very elevated station in the death of the nafs. In this maqam, the seeker is fully satisfied with his Lord. He remains in the constant witnessing of the light and in divine proximity. He no longer sees anything lowly in creation, since he knows that it is only a reflection of the luminous beauty of the divine names, the Jamal. What may seem lowly or degrading in the eyes of some will be very elevated and beautiful in the eyes of others. Take, for example, garbage. From your delimited sight, you see it as repulsive, while an insect will see it as an absolute feast. There are therefore two different points of view that the seeker must unite in a gaze of divine beauty. This is what the people of inner vision, of Basira, have done. They have annihilated opposing characteristics by vanishing in the light of God, which has allowed them to witness divine mercy in everything and at every moment. It is notably in this sense that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Verily, God created Adam in the image of Ar-Rahman, the most merciful." You must return to the haqiqah, the ultimate reality of this illusory world. What is it? It is the handful of light that God took and to which he said, "Be Muhammad." Whoever understands and tastes this reality, if he were to see something vile or degrading around him, you would see him drowned in shame before his Lord, for this would mean that he had returned to the darkness of his lower self. If he goes against that with which the light has descended into his heart, he will find it coercive, and it will be a witness against him on the day of judgment. Purify your heart and your limbs from human attributes, if you wish to strive towards the attributes of lordship, and to be able to perceive the luminous prophetic reality of Al-Mustafa, the Chosen One, alayhi salatu wasalam. By achieving this return to your spiritual origin, you will perceive every action as coming purely and totally from God. You will taste this reality and realize it through luminous unveiling. If you do not succeed in this, it is because you have not placed your Lord at the center of your heart and at the center of your life, and you must work to correct this. If you had done so, you would have seen the light illuminate your heart and overflow from your eyes until it overwhelmed your entire vision. This is the marker of lordly presence. The Prophet ﷺ said, "God was and nothing was with him." In our tariqah, we say that light is the only true existence. As for darkness, it has no existence, and you must see it disappear in the light which represents the face of our Lord, Wajhullah. You will realize this as you progress in your spiritual path. First, you realize your connection and your proximity with the real. You then rise to the station of witnessing, particular to the people of the batin, and you continue to advance until you reach the station in which you will be fully immersed in the witnessing of divine reality. This is why some who know by God have said, if I had tried to see other than him, I would not have been able to. Because in reality, the one whose heart is totally illuminated and oriented towards God will no longer be able to see or hear other than him. Even one's own actions will be perceived as coming from the real. This is true sincerity. These people have succeeded in bringing everything back to the name that unites all things, Allah. So understand. You wonder why you can't realize this. To understand, we must distinguish between Ahlul Aql and Ahlul Ilm, the people of the Aql, the intellect, and the people of Ilm, knowledge. What is the difference? Intellect refers to understanding, while knowledge refers to realization. In other words, the disciple who reaches the first secret is one of the people of Aql. He understands it by intellectualizing it, more or less, but he faces difficulty fully experiencing it. The people of Ilm, on the other hand, are those who completely melt and realize themselves in this secret. The Prophet ﷺ said, "He who knows his nafs knows his Lord." The nafs is the source of the spirit, and the spirit is the source of realization in God. As for the intellect, it is a secret among the secrets of God, which allows you to access the realities of the spirit. This illusion can only be understood by those who are endowed with a strong spiritual taste, those whose nafs has been annihilated, and who have had the privilege of enjoying the companionship of an authentic Arif Billah, knower by God. The latter is a true alchemist. He not only transformed a base metal into gold or silver. No, this is low-level alchemy. The Arif Billah transformed the disciple's nafs into spirit and light through the secret and sciences emanating from the highest maqamat, the highest stations. As we have not ceased to say since the beginning, understand the importance of the companionship of the Arifin. This is the reason why it is obligatory and a priority for the one who seeks the presence of his Lord to seek the company of those who know through God. This is better for him than anything he could perform as worship. Shaykh Al-Karkari says, the words of a man who attaches himself to us while claiming to gain nothing from it are inaudible. Companionship and commitment to the Arifin will always be beneficial to the seeker. He is like someone who would accompany a perfume seller and constantly enjoy his good smell and perfumes. As for someone who accompanies the realized Shaykh without making the commitment, the bay'ah, he is like one who simply entered the perfume shop without buying anything and without having been able to enjoy it. In every era, this universal man, Al-Insan al-Kamil, appears among men. He is the Sultan and the Imam of the people, since he is the one who has reached the highest spiritual stations of his time. Therefore, nearness to him allows believers to access the rectitude of the heart and the body. It leads them to believe and follow the Messenger of God ﷺ through direct witnessing until they see the prophetic states, words, and deeds manifest in themselves. As for those who reject the universal man and sometimes go as far as to declare him a disbeliever, they have fallen into endless misguidance. Shaykh Buzidi, may God have mercy on him, said, I see that the awliyaullah of the early days practiced a lot of awrad, a lot of litanies, and remained firm in their invocation. They imposed heavy practices on themselves compared to the people of our time. Today, people have more illumination while they make less effort. Indeed, people of past centuries outwardly manifested the fitrah, good intention, and sincerity. They sincerely and ardently sought the Shaykh, who could lead them to divine nearness and knowledge. When they met him, it was enough for them to see in him a sign for them to recognize his wilayah, his sainthood, and give him respect and reverence. Today, it is quite the opposite. People are far removed from the fitrah and are completely immersed in the materiality of this world. The end of times is approaching, and people are completely immersed in the darkness of the nafs. The path to spiritual realization is therefore much longer than for previous generations, and the wilaya, sainthood, must manifest itself in a much stronger way than in the past. Shaykh Buzidi confirms this when he says, I think that our time is more difficult than that of the companions, because at that time, whoever returned to Islam became better and good, since the nafs was in the fitrah. Today, and as the end of time approaches, Muslims pray, fast, and make their pilgrimage, but hearts are increasingly corrupted by the love of this lower world and by distance from the haqiqah. It is therefore obvious that in this context, those who manage to return to the fitrah and to the primordial reality will reach very high spiritual stations. It is in this sense that the Prophet ﷺ says, the best of my community are among the first and the last, and between them the difficulties are manifest. The best of the Muhammadan community are therefore those who lived with the Chosen One among the first, and those who live with his luminous spirit at the end of time among the last. Shaykh Buzidi said, I used to deny these words for years until God revealed the reality. I could see that people in our time no longer have this yearning for God, except for those who have been granted spiritual status and aspiration. Yearning for God is a strong aspiration that arises in the heart of the believer, and very few have realized it. Indeed, the majority of Muslims are content to perform acts of bodily worship while completely neglecting their hearts. Worse, we see pseudo shuyukh of tarbiyah claiming to lead their disciples to inner purification, while they have the same spiritual degree as the latter. They know nothing of the secrets of the nafs or esoteric realities, and they claim to be able to lead people to spiritual realization. How can one who has not reached his Lord lead others? These are the people who are placed on pedestals. It is to them that credibility is granted, while the real people of God are mocked, and attempts are made to divert seekers from their gatherings. The words of Shaykh Buzidi are true and relevant to our times. May Allah shower His graces and blessings upon the community of Sayyidina Muhammad, and may He fill them with His bounty and generosity, for He is indeed the one who hears and responds to requests. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad, كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد.